huge distraction. So while everyone looks over here at the debt, there are things going on over here under the radar. The House, a House panel, approved a law that would force internet providers to keep logs of their customers' activities for 1 year in case police want to review them. This includes IP addresses, names, addresses, phone numbers, credit card numbers, bank account numbers, representing a giant data bank of every digital act by every American, as one lawmaker put it. But it's called the Protecting Children from Internet Pornographers Act of 2011. Very noble. And that's because, as the co-sponsor of the bill put it, a Republican from Texas, Lamar Smith, he said, quote, every piece of prematurely discarded information could be the footprint of a child predator. This bill ensures that the online footprints of predators are not erased. The problem is the information would be available to police investigating any crime, and maybe even attorneys working on civil disputes. And it's maybe so invasive that the co-author of the Patriot Act says it goes too far in invading privacy. The co-author of the Patriot Act? I mean, really? And yesterday we told you also about the FISA Amendments Act, the one built in 2008 designed to make warrantless wiretapping legal. It doesn't expire until 2012, but according to reports, yesterday senators may have met behind closed doors to try to get it extended. Why now? But to tell us what this all means in very real terms to your civil liberties is Julian Sanchez. He's a research fellow at the Cato Institute, and he follows all of this. Now, my first question to you, and thank you for being here.
Always a pleasure.
You follow this. You follow privacy very closely. It is your thing. Do you normally see this much going on Capitol Hill in 1 week having to do with majorly scary-sounding privacy laws?
It is impressive how much they're managing to get done despite the fuss about the debt ceiling. Although I will say that the data retention is something that has been on the FBI's wish list for years, and certainly something they've been holding hearings on since January. It is convenient that they managed to bring it to a head just now when the press's attention is elsewhere.
Do you think they did it on purpose, and why do you think? Because one of the analyses of this child pornography bill is that because of the name, because of the stated purpose, it's very difficult politically for lawmakers to vote against it. So why now during this, under the radar time?
I won't guess about whether that's on purpose or not. I mean, the schedule's tight enough that it would be tricky to really plan a crisis like this to coincide with this particular bill. I will say that it's interesting that if you look back at the hearings they had in January, it was pretty clear that they were talking about data retention. And they mentioned child pornography as one of the various things that you might find it useful to have this information for. But it was clear that this was about a data retention proposal. And so the idea that this was going to get squeezed into something with child porn right in the headline to make people, and it's clear, if you talk to technology companies, you talk to people who work at the internet service providers, at cellular providers, they talk about this being a burden and this being something that's going to be a huge hassle for them, expensive for them to comply with, possibly create technical problems. But it's also something that they're terrified of publicly opposing. Okay,
and you say that it's not really about child pornography.
Well,
I've seen you in past interviews say that.
Well, certainly it's the case that this is something that one, is in no way limited to child pornography. And if you look at the text of the provision that requires retention of data, it doesn't say anything about child pornography. It just says they have to keep information about the IP address or temporary routing address assigned to each account. Now, that's incredibly vague, and it's not clear entirely what it means. But it is clear that it's no way limited to child porn. And it's also clear that this is something that when the GAO looked at it, when the Government Accountability Office, the internal watchdog, tried to check these claims that this was a problem, they found that it wasn't. They had a report they issued in March that said, it turns out that most of the time when the FBI or other law enforcement agencies come and ask for information about who was using a certain IP address at a certain time, they're able to provide that. And when they're not able to provide it, usually law enforcement can get that information by some other means.
So then what's the point of this?
The point, I think, is to one, create less hassle for a whole range of different kinds of investigations. It doesn't seem like this is a huge problem here, but it might be that there are other cases where it's more useful to be able to have this information for a longer period of time. And again, not just useful to law enforcement, but useful to anyone who wants to monitor internet activity.
Well, how can anyone monitor it? What is going to be the parameters? And is this going to be shady like the FISA amendments where people don't really have to say what they're using it for?
Well, so the thing is that there's an incredibly low standard in general for access to information held by third parties, by corporations. So we think of the Fourth Amendment as requiring probable cause if someone wants to come into your home and look at the books that you're reading. The problem is that if AT&T or Comcast or Verizon has information about what sites you've been visiting or what address you were assigned when you were visiting different sites, that's not considered your private information anymore, and so they can get that often with a mere subpoena. And the same thing applies when you talk about private litigation. If the RIAA or the music industry or the movie industry decide they want to hunt down people who are visiting sites where movies and songs are traded, if a corporation decides they want to find out who's been bad-mouthing them on internet chat boards, well, if they can start litigation, and often as a result of discovery in the early phases of litigation, whether or not the litigation has any merit, discover the identities of those people. And again, there's nothing to prevent a private entity from using the information that's stored for law enforcement purposes as information that's useful to them in private litigation.
So basically anybody can get access to this, but it sounds like it's kind of already happening.
Well, not just anyone can get access, but anyone who's willing to essentially hire some lawyers, certainly privately has a good chance of getting it. For law enforcement, again, it's become all but trivial for this kind of information to be obtained.
What about hackers?
That's another question, yeah. I
think is bank information, this is addresses, this is...
Part of it is not clear exactly what has to be retained. The bill talks about retaining the temporary routing information that is associated with each account.
Okay, but what does that mean
exactly
to normal people?
This is the problem. Normally you think about something like an IP address that you're assigned temporarily when you log in from home. Well, the problem is if they just keep the IP address, that's not very useful in itself. What they want is the ability to associate that with a particular person. Well, if you're Comcast and you're talking about assigning a particular IP address to a particular account, that's no problem. It becomes a lot trickier when you think about things like a paid service where you're logging in at a cyber cafe and you may have a temporary allocation of time and you pay in cash. Well, do they have to be able to actually associate that information back to the person who bought it?
It all sounds very confusing. But
it is very confusing.
But my one question that sticks out is just yes or no. One member of Congress who led the opposition to this bill, she proposed naming it the Keep Every American's Digital Data for Submission to the Federal Government Without a Warrant Act of 2011. Is that more accurate?
Zoe Lofgren, my personal preference is for the You Are All Criminals Act. Which is shorter and I think more to the point because it reverses the usual presumption that we do a search when we think a particular person is guilty. And the assumption behind this bill is we keep everyone's data, we make the company store everyone's information for the government because anyone might be guilty.
There you go. The You Are All Criminals Act being passed at a House panel while the debt debate rages on. Thank you for being here.
Always a pleasure.
Now, just ahead.